Hello everybody, my name's Octavian, it's good to see you all, and I was encouraged recently by some of my viewers to put my thoughts on the balance changes we just received from on high from Grinding Gear Games into a short video and sort of collect everything together so that you guys can hear my thoughts for those of you who are interested. So, without any other preamble, because I'm not here to waste your time, let's get into this. The Delve balance changes, and this is not a full patch notes. These balance changes are just sort of a overarching scheme with a few juicy bits of specific detail thrown in here or there. Once again, GGG masters the art of the tease. I'm sure we'll be seeing full patch notes tomorrow, perhaps later on in the day. We'll have to find out. But let's get started. Trap throw time, multi-trap, cluster trap, and mine field. Traps, and to a much lesser extent mines, on certain skills were more powerful than we were comfortable with, invalidating other ways of using many skills. This is quite true. We've increased the throw time on traps and the damage penalty on multi-trap and minefield support, while lowering the number of traps thrown by cluster trap by 1. So this means you'll go from throwing 4 to 3 traps, and 5 to 4 if you have the Shaper Gloves to throw an additional trap. We'll be increasing the damage of trap skills and mine skills like Lightning Trap and Fire Nova Mine to compensate for this damage loss, so the native mines and the native traps may see a buff, which is a little crazy because if you've seen some of my other content on this channel, you may already know just how powerful Fire Trap is. It's not specifically on this list, but they say the damage of trap skills and mine skills like Lightning Trap and Fire Nova Mine, so perhaps Fire Trap is on that list of traps that'll get buffed, and if Fire Trap sees any more buffs, well, it's going to be one of the premier single target skills in the game, pretty much regardless of the reduced trap throwing speed that may come with this patch, unless it's absolutely just kneecapping the playstyle as a whole, which I really doubt will happen. Instant skills. We've changed what it means to be instant, to mean the skill can be used while performing other actions. They can't be used while you're unable to take any action, like while stunned or frozen. We've made a large number of effects instant, mostly buffs. Most of these are reservation effects to make applying your auras and heralds faster, but we've also applied this to Molten Shell, Phase Run, Blood Rage, Convocation, and Righteous Fire. Neat, nice little bit of quality of life. Maybe there's some way this can be broken. If you have an instant spell and you have a on-mana expenditure effect and these spells still cost mana, perhaps spamming the button as hard as you can, or even using a macro, which I wouldn't suggest, it's on the shady side of things, to expend that mana as quickly as possible and proc a Kitava's Thirst, for instance, or something like that, or Kitava's Feast, whichever one's the helmet and not the axe. Could be neat. I don't know if that's really going to happen. This is mostly just a quality of life thing. Most of these otherwise been untouched other than adding a short cooldown, so perhaps something like Phase Run or Blood Rage has gained a cooldown to avoid what I specifically talked about there. Only Molten Shell was increased at mana cost at lower levels. We'll be monitoring these skills and being mindful of adding future instant skills, so they need to be timed rather well, rather than using them every time they're off cooldown. That's interesting. I like the idea of that. Spell block. We've changed how spell block is gained, so it's only available from flat sources of spell block. This is a really significant change here. All existing sources of attack block to spell block conversion have been changed to a flat source of spell block, and we've added spell block to more places in the passive tree with higher values than were previously available. So it's easier to stack spell block if you're just looking to stack it raw, and you can no longer convert. So something like Wrathpith Globe, for instance, instead of saying 70 or 60% of your attack block converted to spell block or gained as spell block, is going to say like 15% spell block on it or something now. I'm really curious to know whether or not shields will just inherently have a bit of spell block alongside their attack block, or if all the sources of spell block they're adding to the game will be compensated to make up that gap. I certainly imagine max block characters will still be doable, or else Gladiator will see even less play, which they do mention Gladiator here. Gladiator passive skill now uses your attack block as your spell block. But yeah, I really hope that you can achieve max block and max spell block outside of Gladiator as well. This is potentially a really volatile, really big change, especially going into Delve, where I think block will be really, really powerful, because if you're just negating damage as you're scaling into content that has ridiculously high damage, it could become very dangerous to not have a defense like block or not have a defense like dodge, at least somewhat invested into. This change was made partially to remove some restrictions that impacted design, but also to let spell block be something all characters can have access to, so this wording here encourages me. rather than being very powerful for very high block characters and weaker for characters that haven't heavily invested in this. So this is going to make it easier then, if, you know, the numbers follow up on the sentiment here, for uninvested characters to get a bit of block, which can help out massively in higher level delves, I have to imagine, obviously. Haven't played any delve yet myself. Movement skills. Movement skills are a core part of gameplay in Path of Exile, both for survival and efficiency. We've tried to reduce some of the disparity between different movement skills, so builds can have different choices on how to approach their mobility. They go into more detail on this later in the post. This is just a first step. We intend to make further changes incrementally over time without destroying the feeling of mastery that their speed grants. Shield Charge. The movement portion of Shield Charge is no longer affected by local weapon speed modifiers on weapons. For those of you who were not aware, Shield Charge did not look at the attacks per second on your weapon to determine whether or not, to determine how quickly it would go. So that meant that whether you had a jeweled foil base, which is very high base attacks per second, or a glass shank, which has a really, really crappy one, it doesn't matter which of those bases you had, and this is no longer how it works, this is how it previously worked. If you had a 20% increased attack speed mod on both of those items, your shield charge would be the same speed, regardless. You know, provided all other modifiers hold true. And no longer will this be the case. Shield charge instead, and let's read the rest of this, the total weapon attack time will still affect the build-up and end animations of the skill, but your travel time will only be impacted by movement speed and global attack speed. This makes using certain weapons, like Breakbeak, far less powerful with the skill, because Breakbeak had the highest source of explicit percent increased attack speed on your weapon. And this is no longer what shield charge we're looking at. So Breakbeak shield charge should still be able to get quite fast, but it will no longer be, you know, equip a Breakbeak and your shield charge is completely solved and you don't need really anything else for it to feel decent. Let's continue though. This flattens the playing field when it comes to what weapons to use. We'll be further reviewing the effective attack speed on the skill in future, but for now we're just adjusting this one aspect of the skill. Flame Dash and Lightning Warp. Flame Dash and Lightning Warp are the two primary caster-based travel skills. In theory? They're casted traveling skills. I would say the two primary ones for casters are Whirling Blades and Shield Charge, but let's go on. And they have fallen behind the effectiveness of Leap Slam, Shield Charge, and Whirling Blades. We're shortening the cooldown on Flame Dash, lowering its cast time slightly, and increasing the range it can travel to be consistent with other skills. It also gains recovery rate as the gem levels. So Flame Dash will get cooldown recovery rate, it will get massive quality of life changes, it seems. Yeah, lower cooldown, just lower base cooldown as well. Flame Dash could be a legitimate movement skill at this point, especially if you get, say, a Watcher's Eye with the haste mod, reduced cooldown of movement skills, and maybe a pair of boots or a belt with reduced cooldown. You know, obviously it's quite a bit of investment, but those items can also be good for other mods. Like you can get a second Watcher's Eye mod. It's not, you know, it's not hugely lost gear slots in terms of opportunity cost. So maybe you could invest enough into Flame Dash to get it to feel good, which is certainly not the previous case. Certainly not. So I like that a lot, and Lightning Warp as well. If I'm reading this right, this is interesting. It has a shorter cast time and starts with 20% reduced duration at level 1 of the gem, scaling slower as it levels. So does that mean scaling slower as it levels? So Lightning Warp is innately faster at low level, and as you level it, it loses that? So it goes like 19% reduced duration, and then 18, and then 17? So the skill doesn't feel as bad when you use at lower levels. People just leave it at level 1, though. I guess that's fine, sure. Sunder is a very powerful leveling tool that provides strong damage and great crowd clearing from a safe distance. We've left the damage intact, but we've lowered the length of the rectangular damage area by 20%. That's a nerf, obviously, 20% smaller, but I honestly don't think that Sunder is going to be that down about this. The reach was really nice, and definitely, like, the skill behavior, like, the shape of Sunder is much more powerful than that of Ground Slam early on, because it just has a better kind of shape for dealing with packs than Ground Slam does, and more reach and that kind of thing. But really, you used Sunder because the damage is crazy for early levels. And I don't think Sunder is a problem child as far as the endgame clear goes, so I think this is going to hit the endgame clear a bit more and not really impact its almost universal use as a leveling tool for melee builds. But we'll see. Kinetic Blast had some mechanical quirks that made it very powerful at area clearing and situationally powerful in some boss encounters. Skill now deals 35% less area damage from what was previously 25% less. I think it'll still be fine. We'll see what else, though. They've also changed how the areas are placed. They can now be placed in slices around the central impact so that they can't overlap. Against walls, some won't be able to spawn at all. That's not going to really hurt your pack clear, I don't think, if I'm understanding it correctly. And that's meant to mitigate Kinetic Blast's ability to absolutely shotgun bosses to death. Slowly, over the last few years in Path of Exile, shotgunning in all of its various forms has been hunted down and cold, run almost extinct from the game now. And Kinetic Blast is going to be joining that list. It already has with the old Frost Wall shotgunning shenanigans. I think this will be felt the most if you were trying to, like, corral a boss into a corner, because you're going to have a lot of those explosions placed in walls, if that makes sense. So the way that I'm understanding it now is, if an explosion would have been placed in a wall with old Kinetic Blast, it instead got placed against that wall or a little away from it, and so it would still be able to technically do damage. Now, if an explosion would be placed in a wall, it just doesn't happen. So that is way, way worse for single target. But KB should still be rather good for clear. It's suffering a bit of a damage penalty, but I don't think that this will affect its clear very much. We'll have to see. KB's a really strong skill. It's going to take a lot to knock it down a peg or two. Or rather, it's got a lot of pegs up over the competition. But, let's move on. Vol soul gain prevention times. Changed all Vol skills that are affected by duration modifiers to have their soul prevention time also affected by the duration modifier. This means that when increasing the duration of Vol haste effect, you're also increasing the soul prevention time. Ugh. This keeps certain skills that could get very long durations from being recharged during prevention time, and is beneficial for effects like Vol Stormcall and Vol Earthquake that would likely already have duration reductions. Yeah, for those two specifically. And even then, that seems a little facetious. Like, the way that they word that, bless them, I love GGG, but I think they're trying to reduce the impact of this here. Not a lot of people were trying to have perma uptime Vol skills, but saying this makes it so the Vol Stormcall and Vol Earthquake are better is in some ways technically true, in some ways not even really true. Like, you would still scale, I've not played Vol Earthquake myself, but from what I'm aware, you would still scale some duration with Vol Earthquake just to get the buff to last longer, so you could traverse from buff to buff without having it fall off more easily. You know, the buff that you gain from using the Vol skill, which causes explosive detonations at your feet as you walk. So it doesn't even seem like it's good for Vol Earthquake, and in fact may even be hurting it from what I'm aware of the build. Again, with the caveat of not having played it. This is just a measure to keep Vol skills down. And that's potentially fine. I mean, that's maybe what needs to be done by the meta. It just leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth the way that they phrase this, trying to make it, I don't know, make it go down easy. Anyways, Vol Righteous Fire now takes the combined life and energy shield sacrifice from energy shield before life to better support low life characters using Vol RF. Sure. Earthquakes and Vol Earthquake. Aftershock damage multiplier is now consistent at all levels. Same value it was at gem level 20. This is to make this skill better to use while leveling before you've had opportunities to invest in it. Fine. Fizz Proj attack damage support. Fizz Proj attack damage support has been renamed Vicious Projectile Support, increasing its readability by 70%. I wonder if they actually counted up the number of letters. It now grants more chaos and more physical damage to supported attacks instead of poison and bleed damage, letting it apply to the damage over time of Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain. More chaos and more physical damage to supported attacks. Sure. I'm interested to try a Caustic Arrow build at some point this coming league. I don't think I'll be league starting it. It's always a little bit dangerous to league start something new or heavily reworked. Because, you know, Shield Throw existed. But I'm interested to try it eventually. I'm actually not sure what I'll be league starting yet. We'll have to find out tomorrow when the patch notes come out. Anyways, passive tree changes. We've adjusted a large number of minion passives, added a new starting minion passive path for the Witch and Templar, saved it, added a new large minion wheel above the Templar's elemental wheel. That being... what's the Templar's elemental wheel they're talking about? Elementalist? Oh god, that's a big link. PoE Planner, and it wants to... there we go. It wants to take me to a bookmarked link, I'm assuming. Just Google it. Thank you. So let me see. Where's this Templar Elemental node that they're talking about? So these ones, possibly? There's these Elemental damage nodes. There's Elementalist. Somewhere in this area, I'd say. We'll have to see the passive tree. I'm curious to know where that would be, though. Templar starting area is already pretty good, aside from these. Like, these actual starting nodes are pretty crap, but all of this stuff is great. Templar starting area has been significantly reworked, improving bonuses as well as pathing, and better enabling the minion attack hybrid. Which starting area now has a minion path replacing its existing mana and mana regen path. That would be this right here. Where was I? Mana skills have been moved to a path alongside the energy shield path, and a new mana notable that grants increased mana, flat mana regen per second, and flask mana recovery. Okay. Guardian no longer has a notable that affects war cries, taking those bonuses and place them on the passive tree. So you can get instant war cries off the passive tree now. One cluster between the Templar and Marauder grants you and allies attack, cast, and move speed if you used a war cry recently, removes war cry mana cost, as well as some other small bonuses. Does it make them instant? Oh, there's another cluster that makes them instant. Another cluster between Marauder and Duelist makes war cry instant. Lowers their cooldown slightly, as well as other minor bonuses. So there's one cluster here that gives you the attack, cast, and movement speed, and something else. And down here is the instant cluster. Very vaguely, obviously, like top left and bottom left of the tree. Guardian Ascendancy has 2 new notable skills that reward having minions while being directly involved in combat, as well as empowering Herald of Purity. Pathfinder Ascendancy now has a 4-point skill path, replacing its previous 2-point skill poison path. That was a mouthful. Mainly because I made it 1. This path includes more potent poison bonuses, chaos attack damage bonuses, general chaos skill effects, and a bonus for the new Herald of Agony. I like that they're working, you know, some more active skills and stuff into... These aren't actives, they're passives technically, but they're working, like, more integral and specific parts of the game into Ascendancies. They did it with Elementalist as well, with the Herald buffs that you get there. It's neat. It is intended to work well alongside the new Chaos Bow skills as well as any poison attack character. Bow passives now affect skill damage over time. Previously, almost all weapon passives gave damage from elements of the attack skills while wielding a weapon of their type. They now grant a bonus to damage over time instead, letting them boost the damage of oh, good god, that's amazing. So, like, this wheel here, instead of saying 24% damage with ailments from attack skills while wielding a bow, it's just 24% damage over time from skills while wielding a bow? That's so much more generic and easy to use. That's really strong. This is a really... it's a tiny little paragraph at the end, but this is a really important change that makes me sort of reconsider Caustic Arrow as a starter, even. That's a lot of damage you can take advantage of, depending on how extensive that change is. Secondary damage. Sources of secondary damage like corpse explosions or the blast from explosive arrow can now be blocked or dodged. The block and dodge type required is based on the source of the secondary damage. This will make explosive arrow easier to mitigate in PvP, but also prevents certain monster abilities like corpse destruction bypassing defensive block or dodge based characters. This has been a long time coming. It's not super important, but because there's only like 5 or 6 sources of secondary damage in the game, but secondary damage was one of those weird little niches of Path of Exile that made absolutely no sense however many times you tried to explain it to somebody. Frostbomb, in addition to reducing life regeneration rate, also reduces ES regeneration rate and recovery rate. This will let players have ways to mitigate very defensive ES characters, which may also come in handy against certain Grandmasters. Yeah, that's going to be a huge nerf to, like, Demi's Grandmaster and stuff. Oof. Alright, well, we are through to the end. Highlights, I would say, include the movement skill changes. Those have been highly anticipated. And this little cluster here. This little bow passives affect damage over time. Doesn't have much fanfare. It's at the end. Got a tiny little paragraph, but that's pretty freaking huge. KB got nerfed. Woo. I think it'll still be strong. And I'm sad about this. I really am. That Vol Cold Snap build that I made is just not going to be doable at all in the upcoming league. Not only is the flask going to be gone, but this is going to hit it hard right in the balls. So, probably won't work. I think traps will still be strong. I think KB will still be strong. I think if Fire Trap gets a buff, that Fire Trap's going to be freaking crazy. And I'm excited. I want to see the full patch notes. Until then, though, I think this is where I must leave you. Thank you all for watching today's video. I say that as if they're daily. They're not, but I am going to be making more content once the new league comes out. Don't you fret your pretty little heads. Thank you all for watching, as I said, and I'll see you in the next one.